Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Spiritual Nerds podcast. And again, we are just three friends here who are passionate about spirituality and metaphysics and the journey of awakening. And so we're back with another episode, and we'll be here every week to have heart-led and spirit-filled conversations on topics that interest us. And it is our deepest intention that this podcast serve to open an authentic, vulnerable, and fun space where we can be ourselves and share our stories and maybe share practices and tools that have helped us on our own spiritual journey. And in doing so, we hope that it may inspire and support you on your own journey of awakening. And today we are here to talk about self-love. What does it mean to us? What challenges have come up for us? And what tools have most supported us in cultivating a deeper love for ourselves? So, what does self-love mean to us?
It's a big one. It's a really, really big one. I would say it's been for me one of the hardest ones to work through, mostly because I think of the conditioning around it, especially maybe as a woman, like it's selfish to love yourself or we're supposed to love everybody else. And I just remember in my 20s, somebody saying that, like talking about self-love and just being like, what is that? Well, I don't even know what you're talking about, you know? So it's been like a long journey to work through that for myself. I think the way that I see it now is really around just listening deeply, really listening deeply to myself and honoring myself and honoring what's coming up for me, like almost like trusting myself over the conditioned mind. So like connecting more deeply with my true voice or my true needs or what I want. And that feels like love to me, you know? But it's taken me a long time to really get there and unwind it all. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think I resonate with everything that you just said. I too have it's been a long process, a long journey. And I couldn't say that now I'm in a place where I'm like, yes, in every moment I love myself and honor myself. And yet I can say that I am so much more living in that place than I ever have before. And for me, I think it's the heart, the essence of this work and true healing. And when I think about it, it's really about finding those parts of ourselves that that have been shamed or we have shamed or have not, we've been told and conditioned or programmed where it's not good enough. You can't take space. You have to take care of everybody else. You know, your body's not good enough or pretty enough or, whatever. We have hundreds of those messages living in us. And I think in every time that happens or every traumatic event that happens, there's a part of us that branches off that is feeling unlovable and unworthy. And my work has been finding those pieces and honoring them and holding space for them. And in that process, remembering like, oh yeah, like that's not true that I'm unlovable. That's not true that I'm not worthy. And I get to remother myself and love those parts of myself to bring myself back to wholeness. And that's the essence for me. That's all of it for me.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what you both said. And when I think about self-love, I also have had a long road in, and I definitely feel like I'm not fully there most of the time. But when I'm listening to both of you, it's making me what's coming up for me is this idea of acknowledging that you deserve to spend time with yourself and reflect and find out what you really need to nourish yourself. And one of the things that was coming up when I was listening to you, Ashley, was it's like getting out of the brain and into the heart. And Shane, I think you were saying that too about the heart. And it's like self love can't live anywhere but the heart, because the brain, often, for me at least, the brain is the place that holds the cultural conditioning, that holds the past memories, that holds all of the things that often I find are in the way of me taking care of myself in a very, you know, thoughtful and nurturing way, and like this kind of whole way. But if you drop into the heart center, there's just a lot more room for all of you to show up and honor all aspects of yourself. And it brings in grace, it brings in softness. All of that stuff happens without involving the mind, because when I do self-love from the mind, I can do it, but it gets clunky. I'm like, should I go get a massage? I don't know. Like, just the thought of a massage is like, ugh, it's hard. Like the closest I can get to like thinking self-lovey kind of actions for myself is like, oh, I'll go on a walk in nature, which is great. And then when I get there, I drop out of the mind and into the heart and into the other aspects of my body, and then I feel great and nourished. But yeah, so I guess for me, self-love is a reminder or an acknowledgement that to get just much more heart-centered and to tap in to that place to try to figure out, what am I really needing? What I'm really needing isn't living up here, it's living here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder if one of the obstacles to that is when you were talking about thinking about self-love from the mind,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like, and this is, I think, why it was so confusing to me in my 20s, is a sort of like ego loving itself or something like that. Just seemed like, ugh, like that's not appealing. Like I don't, like, so there's like almost an invitation that's much, much deeper than that I think it just took me a while to get to. And I think, so for me, the self-love from the ego place makes no sense. But this deeper layer of like really tending to what is arising in you for you, and really honoring that and being with that and being with yourself. It's almost like having your own back. But I feel like what ends up happening is this realization of the truth of who you are, which is love. So it becomes this thing where you are love. As you open more and more to the energy of self-love, you're opening more and more to the truth of who you are. And then there's this infinite well of love, but it's not for Ashley. It's like just the vibration or the essence of love. It's for everybody. And it's here for everybody. It doesn't discriminate. There's no judgment in it. And so I think that was like the big turning point for me, was taking it out of the ego, taking it out of judgment. Because if you do it through the lens of judgment, 1 minute you're lovable, the next minute you're not lovable. You can't hold the space. It's not manageable in that way, because everything has its opposite, So if I'm seeking self-love by being a good person, or I don't know, a straight A student, well, sometimes I'm not going to be a good person and sometimes I'm not going to be a straight A student. So it's like just a very faulty, you know, conditioned way of being. But I mean, my whole childhood was the drive. I was seeking worthiness through these things that didn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, I think you both kind of nailed it there. It's like when we're coming from the mind, one, it's really hard to get through all the chatter of why we're not lovable and all the reasons why we aren't worthy of it. And it is coming from that ego place of doing. If I do this thing, if I be like this, then I am. Versus what you're saying, Ashley, and what you were talking, Nate, is like if you drop into the heart, then this part, like it's about being, it's not about doing. And it's about tapping into, yes, there's this universal love that is ever present within us and all around us. And just by the very nature of our existence, we are part of that. And so we are that. There is no worthiness. We just are. If somebody said that to me in my 20s, I'd be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I mean, this has been a
Totally.
long journey to get to that place of realization. And I think it's those little steps, like you guys were saying, of the reconnection to our heart, of the noticing when we have that voice of criticism or those moments where we feel shameful, of nurturing and getting curious and like, what does that part need to know right now or to be heard, so that it can feel more lovable. And it's steps to get to that place where we're like, I am just love. But that's the goal, right? Is to know that, because that's the truth, and to really know and be able to embody that truth.
Yeah. One of the things that this is also making me think about in terms of self-love is when you can come at it from that place, and again, kind of getting into the heart center, or also just in that broader expanse of I am part of the divine. I'm part of the all. I am one with creator. Is that it then gives you access in a way that doesn't feel scary to look at the parts of yourself that have been maybe damaged or hurt, or where you're holding on to emotions or feelings that are really at the root of why you have a hard time accessing self-love. And you can look at them in a way that doesn't feel as scary as it does when you're kind of looking at it, processing it with the egoic mind, and you're like able to hold love for the feelings. Like, oh wow, there's resentment there, way down there, in like this very young spot, or there's fear, or there's abandonment issues, whatever it is. And bringing that kind of universal love to that energy, and giving it love and honoring it for what it taught you, and how it helped you at that stage you were in to create helpful boundaries and to manage yourself, and to give it love, and then to say, I got this now. And my biggest gift of self-love is releasing you that energy back to the universe and saying, you did your job and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. I was thinking what's so confusing about, or where people might get stuck in this universal tapping into what you're talking about, is I imagine that when we were in our 20s, when this was confusing, that if something arose in you, something you did or some part of you that you knew from your conditioning wasn't acceptable in the culture, to your parents or to your peer group or whatever, you felt almost like that aspect of you, or that thing that happened or whatever it is you. And so you end up just landing in unworthiness because there's nothing outside of it, right? So it's like, this is me. And I think as we develop our, I don't know what you call it, spiritual mindset, as you drop in more and more to this inner knowing of, I maybe have that, or I am that, but that is an aspect of me, but it isn't me. I am this eternal being. I am, unity consciousness. I am part of the whole thing. But so that aspect of it is the discovery of that is almost critical to this idea of self-love. Because if you don't have some aspect of you that can hold these parts, and we, in our religion, we handed it over to God, but God wasn't us. God was the judge, the one that could deem us worthy or not worthy, or forgive us of our sins or whatever. But we're now discovering that we can hold and we can love and we can forgive and we can have compassion for all of it. And we all know that kind of unconditional love and compassion. We have it for children, or we have it for the frail or the poor, or it rises up in us, naturally. So we know everyone has that experience of unconditional love, but to really hold that for yourself, this is just a profound experience. And how do we get there? What are the steps to like discovering that or being able to practice holding that? Does that seem right? Like that's a critical part of it?
Yeah.
Are we forgetting the time that we didn't know that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is a critical part of it. And I'll be just honest. We keep speaking about our 20s. I was definitely in my 30s and still like very not there.
Me too.
So people
Yeah.
who are like, oh gosh, I'm way out of my 20s and I'm not there. It's like, it's all okay. And yeah, I think that was a big turning point. I loved what you were talking about of like not over identifying with these parts of us, that it's one aspect. It's not all of who we are. And there is this, what we keep coming back to, this like energy of love and divinity within us. And I think even if you're not quite there yet, where you are ready to acknowledge or feel that within yourself, just knowing that those parts of like, oh, the part that's resentful or the part that is angry or the part that's super annoyed with my kid right now, even though they're just upset, but I'm annoyed with it. Like, we do have these internal things of like, we shouldn't, especially if you're spiritual, right? Then you're just all love and you're all peace and you're all forgiveness. And so then I think there's this idea that when any of these other pieces pop up, well, then those aren't acceptable and we have to shove them away. And yet it's like we are still human and those parts are there and they're there from our past experiences, but they're also just part of like being human. Sometimes I'm going to get really annoyed. Sometimes I'm going to act in ways that I would rather not act. And like, can we practice that self-forgiveness and be like, oh yeah, I was just really mean and I still love myself. That part of me is okay too. And I can forgive myself and take ownership and repair or whatever. But like all of those pieces are still deserving of love, even if they're not the socially acceptable or the spiritually acceptable aspects of ourselves.
Especially
Yeah.
those aspects. Those were the disavowed parts. That's what you were talking about earlier. Those are the disavowed parts. And so as we open up and we are more willing, more open, more accepting, more and more of them come in. It's almost like it's like a safe haven is available. And so I've felt like an acceleration of self-forgiveness and self-acceptance in the past few years, because the more I open up to it, the more it comes in. It's not like you never have that again. It's like, oh, it's here right now,
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about being perfect. It's about activating that self-love, activating them.
Yeah, I think part of what I'm hearing in what you were saying, Ashley, about talking about like the how do we get there kind of thing, from a place of like maybe 20s or 30s, and I agree, Shayna, it was the same way. I remember watching a Wayne Dyer video in college. It was like on PBS when they were doing pledges, and I turned to my roommate and I was like, "You have any idea what the hell this guy is saying?" I'm like, "It's cool. He seems like a cool bald dude. I have no idea what he's saying." Like words were coming out of his mouth, and it was like completely just like going right by me. Um, but um, I think what you're talking about is the importance of having a foundation or a framework, like a knowing. It's not, and it is again. So like foundation and framework kind of suck as words because they make it seem like they bring it up into the mind. And what it really is a knowing or an understanding that I am one that's part of a whole. I love like Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, which one of the things that he has you do is you just keep stepping backwards and backwards and backwards, more and more removed until you get like far enough back to where you are just observing and there is nothing else there. And it just peels away all the layers of the onion, which are like culture, conditioning, feelings, all of those things. And one of the things that you begin to realize is that you are like, if you judge yourself on feelings, that's like so fickle because feelings are meant to be like we're meant to be a screen door, and feelings are meant to just flow through us and flow out of us. But what so many, and I'm will just be honest, like me, a feeling will try to flow through me and I'll be like, oh God, I hate that feeling, let me hold on to it and really like look at it for a while and then maybe I'll tuck it away for later. And it's like, no, man, that's not what we were meant to do. Feelings are just indicators for us. They're signposts. They're meant to be things that just flow through you. You experience them and then you let them go. And you definitely don't judge yourself for them. And I think that that is where a lot of times we get caught up in the judgment of having feelings. But feelings are like the wind. You can't judge the wind. It just happens. And then the other thing that I was thinking about when I was thinking about what you were saying, and this has been something that I've been coming to a lot lately, is this idea that self love or forgiveness or just even managing these feelings, all of this stuff, for many for many years for me, I felt like this was work or things that I had to do. And more, I'm moving into this place of just realizing, like right here and now, it's gone. It's gone because it was never there to begin with. It's a construct of the mind. You are a fractal of God. Everything is just created by you. And if you're just like self worth, it's right here. Doubt, it's gone. Just let it go. It doesn't have to be work. We are the ones doing all of this. And then when you move into that place, the I am kind of creator zone, then self-love is not a concept, it's just an is. Because I love life and I love so many aspects of life. And so if I love all of life, then I am love. Then I love myself, then I love everything else as well. There's just, but again, to your point, there are some of these things where it's like that's a framework that I've built up over a long time. I don't actually think you have to do a ton of work to get there, but you do have to believe or trust or have faith in that kind of concept. Otherwise, you could just feel like your wheels are spinning. I
Mhm.
don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I would be curious to get your guys' thoughts on, because when I hear that piece of like, oh, well, I'm choosing self worth and I'm releasing, like self doubt is just gone. How does it feels a little tricky to me in terms of spiritual bypassing and
Mm-hmm.
not honoring, like I get like we don't need to get stuck in it and get like, okay, let
Yeah.
me dig as deep as possible into this self-doubt and why is it here and pick it apart a ton. But I'd be curious of like, how does that not fall kind of in the spiritual bypassing? I think I lean more towards the honoring and just holding space for the self doubt and not necessarily attaching to it, but not just being like, nope, I don't want to, like, I'm just going to let that go. Then it feels like a part of me might be getting not witnessed.
Yeah. For me, it's the identification of it and the sitting with it before I release it is, I guess what I'm saying is that's all that you need to do with it.
Mhm.
It doesn't need to be something that you chew on and you really work over. And I say that as someone who is not trying to spiritually bypass, but has spent a ridiculous amount of time masticating on my fucking emotions. My language was like over and over, just letting the brain and the wheels get really in there. And it's just, I guess, in my feeling is that if I believe what I believe and I follow the logic steps of how I think the universe works, and I think that I am the creator, and I think I'm a fractal of God, and all that is showing up is something that I am in co-creation with, and something that is showing up for my greatest good, then I don't need to do a whole lot of work around it. But I do agree that acknowledgement and sitting with it is important. But I just also think that after us, that it doesn't need to be a very prolonged experience, that we can just kind of move through it and allow ourselves the power that I think we have to release and just say it's gone. I mean, I'm ready to release this. And you might have to do it a couple times, and that's okay too, because that's just part of what we're doing.
Yeah. That makes so much more sense to me. I understand that now that, yeah, we don't, I think it's, can be a very typical way that maybe therapists use, or like different things where we like really talk it out and we dive deep and we like try to piece it all apart. And that can be really useful. And I think you're right. Sometimes it's just the acknowledgement itself and sitting with that, like, we don't even need to release it. It releases itself. All it needs is a little tenderness and connection, and then it can move on. And we don't need to think too much about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say this is like, if I was gonna wish a self-love practice on anybody, it would be this. It would be being able to allow everything to be here, but not necessarily create a problem, not necessarily make it into a problem, but almost like receive it, receive your experience, allow your experience to be here. As soon as we start to engage from the ego, we've now created a whole new thing. And sometimes the ego wants to be like, oh, this is a great experience. We have to be careful with that too, when we get too involved in the judgment of things. But this, like, real allowing, I mean, the best metaphor is, parenting a young child. I feel like this came up last time. It's like this just attunement. It's just a container. It's just a holding of life and that experience. And I really can remember this in a very profound way. On my first long silent retreat, I was just wrestling with myself, and there was a lot of self-judgment coming up. I mean, I was like, I'm terrible at this. I don't know why I came. It was just beating myself up. And by the fourth day, I mean, it's exhausting. There's nothing else to do but wrestle with your own mind. By the fourth day, I gave up. I was like, I give up. This is too much. I give up. And in the giving up, what arose was this allowing. Well, of course, he all week had been saying, allow, 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 allow. I guess I didn't understand it. And then all of a sudden, this energy of allowing was there. But the most beautiful part of it was when I stepped into what you were talking about, Nate, with the untethered soul, with Michael Singer's instruction, like when I just really got into that very pure state of allowing that didn't have judgment, love arose on its own. It was not something that I was infusing on it. He wasn't talking about love. In fact, I remember writing in my journal that day, why isn't he talking about love? Of course, probably he was talking about love. But because this love just arose naturally. And I thought that was just absolutely incredible. So when we get out of our egoic mind, when we get out of that judgment, that good, bad, it's like, oh, there's just love here. That's just what's here. And it's just the most incredible discovery. I love discovering that over and over again, And to me, that's self-love. It's like the allowing is saying, it's like saying to your kids, you can be whoever you are. It's saying that to yourself. Your experience is your experience. You can have any experience, and it's okay. And you're still lovable and you're still worthy. And we can do that for ourselves. We can activate that for ourselves.
Now, I wonder, we went very esoteric and kind of metaphysical, and I think that's awesome. But I would be curious also just to get it practical and granular, like what earth-based self-love stuff do we all find that is beneficial or helpful? And it could be, obviously it could be some blend of the two things, but I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I have two things that came up when I think about my own process of cultivating a deeper self love. The first one that I did that like really sank in for me was mirror work, Louise Hayes's mirror work. And whoever's not familiar with that, it's like literally looking in a mirror and being with whatever arises. Again, it's this sort of allowance and finding and saying loving things to yourself. And I noticed at first, often it's encouraged to just like state it as if it's true. And that feels hard to be like, I love myself. And that doesn't necessarily feel true. But I will, even before I go there, I want to back up. And I could say, literally just looking in the mirror at myself was so uncomfortable without even saying words. Like the amount of emotion that came up from just looking and being with myself in that way was incredibly difficult. So the power of just being in front of the mirror and witnessing and being with yourself without saying anything, I think is in a really powerful practice. And then cultivating this, like, I'm allowing myself to open up to loving myself. I am willing to let go of judgment around myself. Like very simple things that just create a little bit of opening. And then the second thing that, and anybody who's interested, you can look up Louise Hay's mirror work and you can get a lot more information. I won't go too deep into direction on that. But the other thing that another one of my mentors shared, and this would be beautiful to bring into mirror work, is just the mantra, I accept myself exactly as I am. I accept myself exactly as I am 100 times a day, 1,000 times a day, whenever those moments come up where we feel judgment towards ourselves. Wait, I'm choosing to accept myself exactly as I am. And that creates some momentum. That's that activation. That's I can be in relationship with myself in a different way. So those are two that have been really helpful for me.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Even as you say that, I could just feel it getting activated. It's like, oh yeah, ooh, that feels really good. I can get into that. It's interesting, like the self-doubt, like using that as an example. I had a lot of self-doubt come up in the last like 6 months and kind of a new energy of it. And, it's always like a little clunky still to like when I have maybe a less familiar aspect or something I haven't, maybe a deeper level or something. I'm like, what's that? Like, ugh, like I'll have the resistance first. But this practical thing of like, oh, first recognizing self-doubt is here. It's like, oh, this is a new aspect that's here. This self-doubt is here. Okay, self-doubt is here. Okay, I welcome you here. You're allowed to be here. And then as I'm going through my day, I just have this awareness. Oh, self-doubt is still here. Self-doubt is here. It disengages me from I am that and I have to solve this problem right away and get rid of it. Right? Because that's the first impulse is to be like, I don't like this. Let's get rid of it, So then to like really turn it around and be like, you can be here. What information do you have for me? And usually when I do that and I'm sitting with it, however long it needs to take, right? It has its own timeline of maybe needing my attention or really giving me an opportunity to sit with it long enough till I get the gift of it. But eventually it works its way through and maybe you don't even notice that it's not there anymore because you've allowed it, because there's been this like deep allowing of this aspect of yourself. So that's like kind of how I work with it in a practical way. Is I just really and it's really in the body. It's not in the mind. Because the mind is like, I don't want self-doubt. The ego is like, that's not good, right? But there's a way that in the body can say, it's okay for you to be here. You are here, by the way. So whether you like it or not, you know? So it's okay for you to be here, and I'm going to make room for this part of you. So, and then if we're welcoming in, something like grief, or we're welcoming, we're saying it's okay, grief, for you to be here. Well, if I'm saying it during my day, it's okay for you to be here, self-doubt, or it's okay for you to be here, grief or anger or whatever, I'm actually going to do my day a little differently than I would if I was resisting it. So I never think these are the ways I'm going to self-care today, but there is kind of a natural way that I might reorganize my day, say no to this or say yes to this or give myself this. If I know that I'm also, there's grief here, or there's self-doubt here.
Something that I think that's a beautiful practice, and something that it made me think really quick that I just want to touch on is that in that practice, I think it reminds me of Tara Brach's work about labeling it without attaching a story to it. And that's where the mind comes in of like, oh, I have this self-doubt, and why, and what do I need to do? And like, da 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 da. And that's where, like, we don't need the story. You can just be like, oh, I witness it. It's here. I'm allowing it. And that's it. And I think there's something important about not necessarily having to unravel this whole story to try to figure it out. You just can welcome it and allow it in.
It took me a long time I suppose it doesn't have to take a long time, but it took me a long time, I think, what's the right way to say it? To acknowledge, acknowledge the almost addictive quality to the problem solver. The part of the mind that wants to solve the puzzle, that wants to figure it out and analyze it. And I love that part of my mind. I do word puzzles, I can activate that, playing Boggle or whatever. I don't know. I can activate that part of my mind. It's still a useful part of my mind, but it had an addictive quality with this stuff, and it wasn't useful.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always useful. I mean, sometimes it's nice to have answers or get insight or whatever, but to really unwind that and allow and go into this space of allowing, where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the messages you're going to get. You don't know what is going to transform. So it takes a little courage to kind of go into that space of almost neutrality. Is that the right word? I don't know. Like neutrality, being like, I don't know, or I don't know, even to let yourself sit in that, and trust the process. Ooh, that was a hard one. That was a really hard one.
Should I go?
Yes, Nate.
Yeah. What's your practical aspect?
My self-love thing that has felt kind of, and this one will be very practical, but I'll kind of broaden it out. Excuse me, is just the morning practice. And I have 3 kids. I make the breakfast for everybody. I get the lunches together. I do a lot of that stuff. Excuse me. And really making the morning practice non-negotiable, and carving out that time and just saying, I'm going to cough and I'm going to mute myself.
I think a morning practices is also essential. I live by morning practices. Yeah. Do you, Ashley? Do you have a regular morning practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm an early riser, and so a lot of my morning practice it can look different, it can look different, but it's really my time with myself and a time in spirit, kind of no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I make a lot of time for meditation and nature. It's not always in the morning, but I am up in the morning without.
Right. I am also very much a morning person. And so I advocate strongly for morning rituals, but I have met many people that I've worked with that are like, no, I'm a night person. So it doesn't have to be the morning, but I do feel like the morning sets you up for the rest of your day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And let's hear what Nate's practices are. What are your morning practices, Nate?
Yeah, I'm curious what your morning practice.
Definitely drinking lots of water. Sorry about that. Well, one of the things I was going to bring in around the morning practice in regards to self-love is, yes, giving yourself the time and the space and that you deserve to have that practice. And then an even more nuanced thing for me is giving myself the self-love to do it my way and to edit and to release so much of kind of the stuff that I have picked up within like the all of the YouTubeosphere and the many self-help books I've gotten about how get up at 5 a.m. and write 6 pages of morning notes. And to me, self-love was doing that and then saying, this is crazy. I cannot do this. And this is not helpful. What is actually helpful for me? So my morning process recently, the aspect of it that is really key and is like a weird self-love thing because it requires a lot of discipline is earthing every day. So it's like my main thing. I get up, I go outside, and I will stand barefoot on the earth, and I face the sun, and I give thanks for the day, and I just ground on a very like real level. And if it's too cold because it's snowing, because now I'm in New York, I will ask a tree if they mind if I can ground with my hands through their trunk. And that's how I do it. And that early, like before I start doing all the other stuff, has been really key for me. It's just like it's such a fast way for me to just bring all of my energy back to center. So, and then I do journaling and things once the kids leave, pull some tarot cards and stuff like that, which is feels to me again like self-love because it's stuff that I find fun. It's not always even essential. I'm just like, I want to do this. This is why I'm going to do it. It's like a way to playfully connect with myself. And Shayna, I will agree. Also, the Louise Hay mirror work was one of my backups to say. I was hoping someone would say that. And the other thing that I think you'll enjoy hearing, Shayna, is that I like doing mirror work specifically with tapping. Sometimes tapping on problems, but also just sometimes I tap doing mirror work, just doing self-love affirmations through the points and like the gazing, the two of them together, it's like supercharged. So
Totally. That's so cool. I love that. Yes, big proponent for tapping. Yeah, I like that combo. I'll say it's like it's making me think too of my like what are the essential practices that I do every morning that gets me into a space of connecting with the love that I am and the divine that I am. And it really is a practice of meditation where I am just asking, I'm calling in like divine source, let me feel this unconditional love. Let me like let it embody me and raise my frequency to the highest extent that it can integrate in this moment. And it sounds maybe it sounds really woo woo and weird, but like I can feel it. And it feels incredible as a reminder and like that it's true. It is me. And I can ask for it and I can feel it. And it's so powerful. And then I go into prayer and I use affirmative prayer. The way that affirmative prayer works is that it's also reminding you of spirit and all spirit is life. It is all of it. And we are one with that. And there's some prayers that are specifically about connecting with the divine love that I am, that as I say them to myself, it's just like I feel the expansiveness and the truth of that. And it's a practice I do regularly so that I can be in that remembrance of my truth and I can tap faster into the love that I am in moments where judgment and other pieces come up.
That's beautiful. What kinds of things come up in affirmative prayer? We could do a whole session on tapping, mirror work, and affirmative prayer. I want to learn all about that.
Totally. What do you mean by what kind of things come up in affirmative prayer?
What does it mean? What is affirmative prayer?
Mm. So it's affirmative prayer comes from the, oh, and you know what? I'm going to blank on the name, but it's Michael Bernard Beckwith and Agape Center and Science of Mind is where affirmative prayer originated. And the way that they understand prayer is not, you're not asking for, you're not begging for, you're not, it's coming into this knowing of who we are. And from that place, we are literally affirming the truth of the things that we are desiring or calling in or wanting to remember. And so if you want, I can share one about divine love.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So there's one all powerful creative life force. Today I call it divinity. It is divinity that creates, guides, and sustains all of life. Its nature is love and light. It is the goodness, the joy, and the beauty that is forever expressing through all of creation. It is infinite, eternal, and supremely generous, giving all the gifts of life to all of creation. All of life is unified by means of this love and light. And I am one with divinity. Its powerful life force is alive in me. I am an essential aspect of creation. And as such, the goodness and the beauty of life are alive in me. I am an expression of the love and light of divinity, and beauty and joy are my very nature. And I affirm now that I am fully open to the warmth of divine love. I find unlimited ways to express my natural state of kindness and joy, and I see goodness and beauty all around me and deep within me. Every breath I take returns me to the deepest truth about my original nature. I allow myself to be guided into my best expression of love. I feel the wonder of being alive, and I celebrate this gift with my thoughts, words, and deeds. There is nothing that can remove me from this glory. And I give thanks for this knowing within me, and I entrust this word of prayer into the creative aspect of the divine that is forever making it so. And so it is.
Mm. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. That was amazing.
Okay. I think we should call it with that
Good.
beautiful prayer for people to absorb and allow to sink in. Thank you for being with us today and listening to us. And we hope that you found some support or inspiration or just enjoyed connecting with us today. And we look forward to being with you again next week.